Welcome to the Redeemed Man podcast. I'm Nate Dewberry, and I'm so thrilled that you're joining us for this episode today. At the Redeemed, we're building a Christ-centered community where men ignite their God-given potential through authentic connections, shared experiences, and meaningful conversations. We believe our podcast is one of those avenues which we can have a meaningful conversation with our guests that our audience as well can participate in through our discussion guides and small groups. So we're excited to welcome today Tensley Almand. Tensley leads the largest homeless ministry in the Southeast at the Atlanta Mission. He has a passion for discipleship and development, and we're so thrilled that he's joining us today. Tensley, welcome to the show.
Thanks for letting me be here, Nate. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure. We're going to start, though, not related to the mission, but related to your journey and your story. So tell me a little bit about when Christ captured your heart and really changed the trajectory of your life.
Yeah, I tell everybody like every good story, it involves a girl, and so I kind of rewind real quick. My parents are childhood sweethearts. Grew up in kind of middle Georgia area, and they were your quintessential family that you think about from just kind of middle Georgia. Like they literally probably had a key to the church. They were in church every week, multiple times a week. But in that, they also experienced a lot of church hurt and a lot of difficulty. And so when my parents got married, they moved to DC and then ultimately back to Atlanta. They just kind of stepped away from church. And it's interesting. My mom gets really mad if I tell people I didn't grow up in a Christian home. She's like, no, you just didn't grow up in a home that went to church. And looking back, I mean, I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. I mean, we were same values, same everything as all of my friends who grew up in church. I went to the lake on Sunday instead of going to church. And really, I tell you that because it's kind of formative for my journey. It's early on, I lived with this impression that it was like we were okay with God, but church just wasn't for us. And we just didn't feel like we fit. We can come back to that if you want to. But fast forward, normal childhood, all the things, really was just a pretty good kid. But show up at Auburn University to do my undergrad. War Eagle. First day, meet a girl, and man, she captured my heart so fast. And she was my next door neighbor, and we started dating almost immediately. It was one of those relationships where you're like, wow, she had no business dating me. Her family and her upbringing was probably the complete opposite of mine. God was somebody you could know, somebody who wanted to know you, wanted to have a relationship with you. And so I think I was probably a good time for a hot minute, but pretty quickly I began to realize, like, I don't know that I'm who she's looking for. Yeah. And so every guy that I know will do whatever it takes to impress a girl. And for me, that meant getting up on Sunday morning and taking her to church and doing different things. And God used this guy's attempt to get a hold of her heart to get a hold of mine. And truthfully, I can remember sitting at Beardy's Memorial Coliseum, RIP, no longer there, back in the day at Auburn. And this guy preached, and it was just a simple Christian message to a room full of college students. And I don't even know if this fits with my theology, but like it was just like it was my time. And I mean, it was like God was talking right to me, and he gave an invitation. And I'll never forget, I raised my hand that night in the middle of that Coliseum, and my life's never been the same. I mean, I gave my heart to Christ that night, and I feel like he changed literally almost everything about me, and that set off a journey that I'm still on today. So that's my story. That's how I came to Christ, and God's used that in some ways that I never would have imagined.
Well, now you've got to unfold the rest of the story with the girl.
Yeah. So the girl is now my wife, and we have 4 amazing kids. We've been married for 25 years, just celebrated our 25th anniversary. And we've been pursuing God our whole life in our marriage, with our kids and our work. God called me to ministry. Fairly quickly after that, I gave my life to Christ sophomore year in college. And junior year, I can remember sitting down with my dad and saying, hey, I don't think I'm going to take over your company. I think I want to go to seminary. And I'd never forget my dad's biggest pushback was, how are you going to afford health insurance? I didn't have an answer. I was like, I don't know. But it's one of those things you look back on, and now we talk about it often. My wife and I do. Her name's Laurie. we talk about it often where it's like, what were we thinking? But we got married in September. We stayed at her parents' house for about 2 weeks after we got married. And then in October, we moved up to North Carolina so I could go to seminary. We packed everything we had in 2 cars, drove about 8 hours away from everybody we knew. Rent was due in 30 days. Neither one of us had a job, but we felt called by God, and it made perfect sense at the time. And I
Right.
guess it worked out. But man, if my 22-year-old now was like, "Hey, I'm going to move," I'd be like, "No, what are you doing?"
uh, love it. God is so faithful, and he takes our really lack of awareness of life and our
Yeah,
obedience and faith sometimes, and sometimes it is a story we could never imagine scripting or on our own. Earlier, before we got on the recording, we were chatting, and you actually, in my mind, have a traitor in your ranks. So we were talking a little bit about one of your boys has ended up at Alabama. Tell us a little bit about your kids and kind of what their life growing up in the church and going and being super involved has looked like for them versus even your own childhood.
yeah. Preachers' kids can be the best and the worst. They can be pretty jaded. They know all the secrets. They know all the tricks. And so, but no, we love our kids to death. We have four of them, three boys, little girl. They range from 22 down to 15. Will, Jake, Eli, and Hallie are our kids, and
Awesome.
like I said, we could not be prouder. They're all fantastic kids, grown up in the church, like you said, have a faith of their own. I think as a parent, it's been so fun to watch our kids really kind of step into their own faith and
Yeah.
live that out. And what does that mean for them? And it stops kind of being my faith and
Yeah.
really becomes theirs. Um, but yeah, so our oldest, he went to Mississippi State for a couple years. College wasn't the best situation for him, so he came back home, got him a job at a company here in Atlanta, and he's just crushing it. And it's one of those, we could do a whole podcast on that, of like, as a parent, how you realize the stories you write for your
Yeah.
kids, and then you have to let go of your
Yeah.
story and let God write his. And I'll tell you today, God's writing a so much better story in his life than I could have ever written, and
So
I
cool.
couldn't be prouder. And he's back at school. He's going to Kennesaw State now, and here in Atlanta, and
It's good.
doing a construction management degree, and has just really found his place in life. And then son you're talking about is Jake. He's a sophomore at Alabama, and just crushing it. He's a civil engineer. The kid just got an A, I think, in Calc 3, and I can't hardly even spell Calc 3. And like he's doing amazing. And then we have two at home, both in high school, a junior in high school, Eli, and a sophomore in high school, Hallie. And they're so full of life. We're either on a court or a field somewhere all
Yeah.
the time. Eli plays lacrosse and Hallie cheers, and so we're out there. We got a JV basketball game tonight that we'll be at watching her cheer. So
Great, love it. Thanks for sharing a little bit of
mhm.
your kids' journey. As my pastor said Sunday, I try to speak to my friends who maybe are on that other side of the fence, but it's kind of like I, I you can't. It's war eagle, so
Yeah,
you can't.
it's
those,
always
those
well.
those other words don't come out.
People tell me that I have a house divided. I'm like, no, I don't. My house isn't divided. I don't know what he's doing, but everybody in my house knows exactly who we cheer for, and it is War Eagle all day long. So,
Well, that's awesome.
so
Well, I when you think about your life and your journey, it really sounds like so much is. Sure, looking back, you can just see the hand of God and the blessing and the faithfulness of our God. But could you speak a little bit about some of those moments, maybe of struggle along the way, where you, even as someone who is following the Lord, hit a really tough season? Because I think so many times we talk about that and can almost glaze over that life can kick you in the teeth.
yeah,
And would love if there's a time that you could speak to about a challenge, a difficulty, a season of doubt.
yeah. I think yeah. Pick one, right? Probably. Well, if I were to go back to the beginning, I don't know that it was a super difficult season, but it was a season where God was doing something in my life, and I think He was teaching me to trust Him and to be very comfortable with who I am. And
Yeah.
not wrestle with things like imposter syndrome and trying to get wrapped up in that. But Laurie and I showed up to seminary, and it was, I'd only been a follower of Jesus for like 2 years. And so, here I am, I show up to seminary and everybody's like called to ministry. And day one, it's like, I'm going to be a pastor and I'm going to be a missionary and I'm going to be a
Yeah.
church planner. And, I didn't know why I was there. And
Mhm.
so like everybody's called to do something. And I was like, hey, I'm called to be here.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's been my journey with God really my whole life. Is I don't know that I have ever felt like God's shown me the path. I felt like God
Yeah.
said, hey, I want you to be right where I have you.
Yeah.
And so like seminary started that journey for me. And it was really of a 3 year degree. It was 2.5 years in before I really knew, okay, God's calling me into full time, vocational ministry. That's going to look like working in a church, and that not only is it going to look like working in a church, but I have a much more administrative or executive bent. That's going to be, I'm going to be there to really be somebody's right hand and make sure they're successful. And so I think that was interesting. Most recently, the most challenging season in ministry for me was certainly during COVID. And I think it was for everybody. But again, it was another season where it was like, and it's certainly, I don't want to make it sound like COVID was about me, because it wasn't, but it was like God used that to be like, hey, are you once again going to trust that I know what is best and what's happening? And to kind of give you the context, we had launched Decatur City Church. I felt like in so many ways I had launched that church so many different times. We had moved, we did the portable world, and I mean we had been a portable church for 7 years, and God had been so faithful, and we were growing. But our dream was always to have a permanent
Yeah.
location, and we opened in a building, and it was a remarkable story where two churches came together and realized, like, hey, we gotta figure out how to share space for the good of the kingdom. And
Yeah.
we spent all this money to renovate this auditorium and this building, and we were in it for a year. And literally, I'm not kidding, we were in it for a year. We opened back up, for January to January. And it's like we start that second year, we're thinking we're gonna have to go to 3 services. It was like all of our dreams were coming true, and everything that we ever wanted was happening. And then in March, COVID hit, and I mean, it just stopped. And all of a sudden, we had this beautiful building that's now sitting empty.
Yeah.
And you talk about just having to really get alone with God and figure out, like, hey, I never signed up to be this kind of pastor. I didn't sign up to
Yeah.
lead this way. Like, why is this a good plan? And then watching as he really showed me and showed our church what being the church was all about. And so it was hard, but it was also this really rewarding, like watching our church really be the church and love on our
Mhm.
community and serve and stay faithful to one another in a season where all the ease of church was kind of taken away from us. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Such a wild time. My wife and I were reflecting on it the other day, and just how, in some ways, it seems super brief now, and yet how in
It
that
does, right?
that season in space, it was like, is this ever going to end, and what does it look like for the future? And yet, it was a defining point for so many
Mm-hmm.
ministries. Whether it was a point for a downward spiral or readjusting and kind of embracing that season and moving forward. For us, even as a ministry, it really helped shift us more toward the online space. And what does that look like for us to create space for guys in community where now they're very much used to
That's right.
talking just like this, and it becomes much more common and has allowed us to connect guys all across the country due to that season. And yet so many of us can reflect back on it, and it had its challenges for sure. I have some great pastors here that were involved in the Methodist denomination, and they went through COVID, and then they went through a season of a lot of denominational turmoil. And
Mm-hmm.
man, it took a toll on those guys of what they were carrying for their people and in leadership and things that they had never faced before. So I can see how for you guys it was a super heavy season, and one that formed you in a lot of different ways, probably some that you're not even aware of yet.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, no, totally. And that's, again, that's the beauty of following God. And
Yeah.
what's the story he's writing, right?
Yes. Well, so take us now. You are at Decatur Church, and then now where you're leading. So, what did that transition and a little bit like, you shared kind of, oh God, I'm just making myself available. But how did that
Right.
door open? And then what has come alive in you that maybe you weren't even aware of, having transitioned to a new type ministry?
Sure. So, kind of give you a little bit of context. I'll take you back. We were, coming out of COVID. Um, because of where we were as a church geographically, the best thing for us to do was to stay meeting online for
Yeah.
a really long time, and that was hard. But it was the way we could serve our community the best, and it kind of felt like the right thing to do. And so we were out for probably right at a year, I think. And so um, remember coming back first Sunday back, and you got to remember, man, a year prior, our last Sunday was Time Change Sunday, which is the worst Sunday of the year, and it was almost standing room only. And so
Yeah.
then fast forward, we come back, and it's like, all right, here we go, we're coming back in person. I remember standing on that stage, and I bet there might have been 50 people in the room at the most. Like, and I was just like, oh no.
Yeah.
And so for a year, I felt like my mission was like, we are getting this thing strong, stable, getting people back in attendance, getting people back in rhythms. And so as that year began to wind down, I can remember sitting at my desk, and I had a calendar behind me on the wall that had out the whole calendar year. And I can just remember the calendar was blank, and I could have looked at it and told you everything we were going to do, when we were going to do it, why we were going to do it. And that felt so strange to
Yeah.
me. And it wasn't like God told me, hey, I'm releasing you or I want you to leave. But I just remember thinking, like, wow, my whole journey with God has been about building and growing and almost this entrepreneurial spirit. And for the first time, that doesn't feel like that. And so that started a series of conversations that I was having with my wife, but also having with God, of just like, what was I called to do? Kind of what's next, which is a scary question. Um, and I remember God making it very clear to me, I called you to create a church in this city that unchurched people would love to attend. And it was like, in that moment, I'm like, we did it. Like we did it. It's one of the largest churches in our side of town. We're in a wildly unchurched community, but people love this church. Nobody's ever seen anything like this in our city. People love it. Even people who don't like church love it. Um, and it was really like, wow, I think I did what I was supposed to do. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to start breaking stuff just so I have something
Yeah.
to fix. And so that kind of, I felt like in that moment I became open to like, okay, what needs to happen, if anything. I had no idea it would be Atlanta Mission. I would have never. But a buddy of mine works at the executive search firm who Atlanta Mission hired. My predecessor had been here 14 years. He was retiring, gave the organization a year notice so they could search and we could have an overlap. And so, yeah, this friend of mine called me and said, hey, I think you should apply for this. And I told him no way. I told him he was crazy. I was adamant that was not. I mean, I knew nothing about homelessness, very little about poverty and addiction. And I was like, no. And he kept after me. And I shared it with a couple of close confidants that this is something I was thinking about, or, should I? And I remember the kind of the entry gate was you had to turn in a resume. And it was so funny in my mind. I was like, well, I don't have a resume. God knows where I am. So if they require a resume, I'm out. And which looking back is so dumb, but at the time it felt so like,
Yeah.
I got it. And this friend goes, he's a graphic designer. He goes, look, you send me all of your material and $100 and I will design a resume. You are being stupid. Like, you need to apply for this job. And I was like, okay. I've told our board this story now. Like, I promised the resume was real. He just designed it. And so I turned it in. I thought nothing of it. And dadgum, if they didn't call me and were like, hey, would you mind filling out this questionnaire? I'm like,
Yeah.
sure. I filled out a questionnaire. And then it was like, hey, would you mind sitting down and talking? And okay, I'll do that. And so every month they would reach out, and every month they would kind of move me to this next step. And it probably took about 8 or 9 months. And I've never interviewed like this, Nate. Like I just was so free and so like I was so convinced that I was not the guy for the job. I mean, this is how bad of a leader I am. I tried for 8 months to talk them out of hiring me, and they hired me. And I would literally show up to interviews like, "This is why I'm not your guy," you know.
Yeah.
And about halfway through the process, I finally asked. I was like, "Hey, why are you talking to me? I mean, what is happening right now?" And they started outlining what they were looking for in a leader, and I was just like, "Oh no, oh no, God's going to do that thing He does again." In fact, I called my wife after that meeting and I said, "Hey, I can't guarantee they're going to pick me, but I know exactly why we're in the interview process, and um, if they offer, I am who they're looking for. This is bad. God's about to do something." And sure enough, 8 months down the road, 9 months in, they offered me the job, and it was like, all right, this is it. It just almost felt like God just kept narrowing the.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is it. I'm called to do it. Like this is, he laid it on my heart. And I joke with, Andy now, cause I didn't want to leave. I was Decatur City's part of North Point Community Church. And it's one of those jobs that you just don't leave. Like why would I leave this job? He was preaching a message, and I don't remember the exact passage and everything, but there's this encounter in one of the gospels where people come to John the Baptist and they're trying to figure out who Jesus is and what does following Jesus look like. And, they think maybe it's religion or maybe it's piety or maybe it's this or that. And he looks at him and says, basically this is Tensley's paraphrase. No. Like if you want to know what following Jesus looks like, go live a life that is consistent with the one you say you believe in and the faith you say you have. In other words, like your actions should match up with your beliefs, and your actions should make people's lives better. And that's really become a cry of my heart and my wife's heart.
Yeah.
Our building campaign at Decatur City was called Better Because, and the idea was that people's faith should be better because we're here. And Better Because has really become a personal kind of mission cry for us. And I can remember sitting on the front row at Decatur City while Andy was walking through this, and I was thinking, I'm. It's so easy for me to commit my life for people and for them to be better because of my faith, if they look like me or if they show up at the church I attend or if I'm comfortable around them. But what about the most vulnerable in our city? And what about those who don't have the opportunity to show up here on a Sunday morning? And would I give my life, I'll get emotional talking about this, but would I give my life so that their life could be better because of my faith?
Yeah.
And once you wrestle that down, God pretty much can do and put you wherever He wants,
Excuse me. Tinsley, so strong. I think all of us could probably wrestle a little more with that and take into account, have we truly surrendered everything and is our heart for the people that Christ clearly says His heart is for? And you stepped into that role. Has there been a couple of moments that stand out to you that really solidified, hey, not only did I see this early on or in the journey when God kind of said, all right, this is what's going to happen, but you affirmed this is the step that you were supposed to take, and you kind of went, man, I'm so excited I'm here.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been in the seat now for almost 4 full years, and I think all of it, all encompassing, and it's not a great answer, is the answer to that. Early on, because I knew nothing. So early on, I walked in, and I had to spend the first 6 months just peppering everybody with questions. I'm sure they were so sick of me because it's like, what are we doing? Why are we doing that? What about this? But, God gives you little glimpses. I remember I met a guy early on. It was probably one of my first weeks of the job. And, I didn't know enough to even know what I was saying, but he looked at me and he's like, I don't want your program. And we can talk about it, but our program is about a year-long program. And it's a little bit unique, but he's like, I don't want your program. I just want a job. And I remember looking at him and he was real frustrated. Like I had just taught this Bible study and I thought like, oh man, he's going to want to talk to me about how great I did or whatever. No, he's like, just give me a job. And I'm like, And I remember I said, how many jobs have you had? And he's like, 14. And I was like, hey, maybe you don't need help getting a job. Maybe what you need is help keeping a job. And what if you're supposed to be here so that you can keep a job? Um, and he was like, okay. And I could tell he wasn't real happy with my answer,
Yeah.
but probably about 3 months later, 4 months later, I was in another one of our buildings and I hear this booming voice call my name and I turn around and it's that same guy. And he runs up to me and wraps his arms around me. And he's like, thank you so much for getting me to stay. Like, this has changed my life forever. And he went and got a job in the house and he's doing great now. And so it's,
Awesome.
you see little moments like that. I think, the way I've described it to people, is this is probably the most authentic version of church that I've ever been a part of. And I love the local church. I mean, I'll sit in the back row at Decatur City now. The only difference is we moved from the front row to the back row, and I'll sit in the back row and I'll still weep over people giving their life to Christ or getting baptized or, some of the videos we share. So it's like, I mean, I love the local church. But truly being the hands and feet of Jesus to the most vulnerable in our community, that'll change your life forever. It's pretty radical.
Tensley, we can obviously tell your heart is there, and that's exciting to see of just, what God has done and how much He's given your heart for the ministry that is yours and the leadership that you carry. Talk to somebody, we have listeners from all over about Atlanta Mission. What's the history of the mission? What's the kind of programming of the mission, kind of a 1,000-foot view of like,
Sure.
What does it look like and how did it develop?
Yeah, so Atlanta Mission is, you said at the beginning, it's the largest and longest running provider of services for men, women, and children experiencing homelessness here in our city. We started in 1938 as a soup kitchen for men who were displaced by the Great Depression. And so one of the things I love about our story is it's just been a journey of see a need, meet a need.
Yeah.
As the needs of our city have grown and evolved, Atlanta Mission has always risen to the challenge and said, hey, we'll grow and evolve with you. And I think that's really where we are now. We're really wrestling with how do we grow and evolve again, because those challenges are getting so much bigger, and we can dive into that if you want to. But to say so that's the kind of the longest running part since 1938. To say largest, so on any given night, we will be able to shelter about 800 men, women, and children across 4 different locations, 3 in downtown Atlanta and then 1 out in Athens, which is a drug and alcohol addiction facility for men living in recovery. And that represents about 35 to 40% of all the shelter beds in the city of Atlanta. So you can see a pretty significant impact. We are funded by individuals, churches, corporations, foundations. Until recently, we literally just got awarded our first government grant, and it's big, but it's not like earth-shattering big. I mean, we're a $20 million a year organization, and our first grant was for like $250 a year. And so you can see, I mean, we exist on the generosity of people, and it's been incredible to see how people show up for us. But what makes us unique is we're not just a shelter. We certainly provide shelter services. We provide what most people would think about, a warm place to stay, hot meals, showers, stability, safety, all that. But our kind of bread and butter is we've created something we call the transformational model. And it's a year-long program where we walk with our clients who choose to enter into the program. We walk with them to identify their core traumas, like what are the root causes of your homelessness? Because there's a lot of different reasons people experience homelessness. So like, hey, what's the root cause of yours? And then how do we tailor make a program that would lead you towards self-sufficiency so that when you graduate our program, you're able to stand on your own and be successful and sustain really the opportunity that's been given to you. The program wraps up with a 4-week vocational training program called Next Steps, where we help our clients, kind of the story I told, we help our clients learn how to not just get a job, but keep a job.
Yeah.
Our vocational training program is largely focused on soft skills. I think most executive teams in our city would benefit from going through our program. I mean, it's all conflict management and truth telling and all of the things. Like, it's amazing how prone we all are to self-sabotage our career. And what we find with a lot of our clients is that's their story is it's just been one of like not having the interpersonal skills to maintain that job. And when you graduate our program, you get a retention coach that walks with you for a year. And what we're finding is 70% of the clients who graduate our program still have their job and still have their housing situation a year after graduation. And so we're real proud of that.
That's
It's
awesome.
amazing.
Yeah.
For perspective, we serve roughly 3,000 people a year that come through our doors. So it's pretty robust program, and we're trying to figure out how to scale it even more to help the growing needs of our city.
So all those 3,000 are go through the program, or you're seeking to get
No,
commitment? What kind of percentage are you able to get to that
um,
year
no,
program?
that's a good question. So we'll serve like this past year. I have the numbers right in front of me. We served 3,400 unique individuals, and 960-ish of those just chose like our emergency
Yeah.
services. They wanted 30-day shelter. And so really what then happens is you have about 1,300 who start the program, and you have about 400 that go all the way through the program. And that was a challenge for me when I first started. I was like, wow, we start with 3,400 and there's like 400 that finish. And at first you're like, is that good? The thing that's hard to tell the story of is there's a lot of people who make these successful exits outside of our program. So
Yeah.
not going all the way through the program, we had about 500 people figure out how to get a job really quick or find a house really
Yeah.
quick and exited into a stable situation, not just a different situation. And so we're seeing, about if you take it all in, you're seeing, roughly 800-ish people successfully leave our organization every single year.
That's phenomenal. Especially knowing oftentimes those underlying issues are sometimes very significant of the process of working
Right.
through those traumas and the mental challenges that may be there. So to see that kind of number, especially in a population that may have more barriers, that is
That's right.
phenomenal. Um, Thinking about kind of what most people are aware of with regards to homelessness, especially in the Christian community,
Mhm.
what would you say that maybe even in your own life that you went, I had no clue until I got in this role, and now it's changed my perspective, and I really wish others understood this about homelessness?
I'm so glad you asked. It's the easiest question out there. The thing that I was totally unaware of, and it makes so much sense once I come face to face with it, is the dangers and the debilitating power of something that we have just started calling relational poverty. And what I think most people are totally unaware of is they see material poverty, right?
Yeah.
And material poverty is debilitating. If you're living in poverty and you have no margin, it's dangerous. And then if you throw in any systemic issues on top of that also make things further difficult, that makes it even more challenging.
Mhm.
But what I don't think any of us truly understand is the dangers of living outside of healthy community. And this is back to it's Jesus following
Yeah.
101,
Yeah.
but we just forget it. And what we see with so many of our clients is that they are almost completely void of healthy relationships. And so when you marry that with material poverty or with substance abuse or mental health or physical health, you know,
Yeah.
game over. And the way I tell people all the time when I talk to churches is um, we, for you or I, if you got that text, it would stop your heart. But if you got a text from your bank today and everything in all your funds had been taken and they were gone and you weren't getting them back, um, you're not spending tonight on the street. You're not all of a sudden finding yourself homeless. You probably have 20 or 30 relationships that would keep you from being there. Our clients don't have that. And that's how they, 9 times out of 10, that's how they find themselves in that
Yeah.
spot. And my son knows I tell this story. I tell this story often. This was another God moment for me early on. I'm face to face with this relational poverty thing. I'm like, I think it makes sense, but I don't know. Um, I was driving to go have dinner with a donor. This is super early on. I can remember where I was driving on the road. My phone rang. It's my oldest son. I told you college didn't go great for him. We brought him home. I got him a job in construction because I really wanted it to kick his butt and get him back in school. He fell in love with it. Another story. But this was his first day on the job. So I thought, okay, he's calling me because it went well. He showed up at his job site in downtown Atlanta. They told him where to park. He was 19. Of course, he knows everything. He says like, well, that spot's closer. I'm going to park over there. Comes back, works a full day of work, comes back and has a nice shiny boot on his car, and he can't get his car home. And he's calling me. He's like, Dad, I got a problem. Tell me your problem. Parked in the wrong spot. I got a boot on my car. I was like, oh, this is easy. I know you've never done it before. There's a number on the boot. You call the number, and when you talk to somebody, you're going to have to give them like your debit card, your credit card. You'll pay a fine, and they'll come out and take the boot off, and then you'll be on your way. And the phone's just silent, and it's like, Dad, I have another problem. I'm like, what is it? He's like, I don't have any money. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you don't have any money? I put money in the account. I know how much money was in there. What do you mean you don't have any money? I spent all that money. I don't have any money. And this is what he said, Dad, if I can't get this boot on my car, I can't get home. And if I can't get home, I won't be able to get back to work. And if I can't get back to work, I'm going to lose this job. And it was as if God was just like, are you paying attention? Because in that moment, the only thing standing between my son and really total destruction was the relationship he had with me. And there was no way I was going to let any of that stuff happen. And so, of course, I paid it. We went on. But our clients don't have that person to call. And that story, and I think so many people look at somebody experiencing homelessness and they're like, that could never be me. And I think they realize how close we all are to it could be us. And if you found yourself void of healthy community, you have no room for error. And you find yourself all alone in that. We hear that story all the time. I got the job. I finally met, a series of events led me to a bad place. Then I finally made really good decisions. I got the job. And then on day one, I had a boot on my car. I couldn't get back to the job. I lost the job. I never got a paycheck. And now it's over. So
makes me think even about a conversation I had this week working with a guy who's connected to our ministry and had a job, went through a divorce, child support set at that amount, loses that job. So now working 2 jobs, has an accident, loses his car. So, immediately puts him in a hole that's tremendous with a legal commitment to a certain amount of money that has to be paid, that even if he were going to get changed is going to take a length of time and money to get it changed. And so here again is someone who luckily has a brother who's letting him live with him, but due to his circumstances, he could have ended up with a very different result, even though he's still in a very challenging situation because he could have had no family. And so I think about that. And it takes me back when you bring up all of this to Acts in the early church. And one of the things that I think so often we don't really relate to well is when they talk about they had all things in common in their material possessions and bringing those together and making sure that people's needs were met. And that really makes me think about that when you're sharing the context of so many people's story of that community that surrounds us and what should be different about faith community. And honestly, when the church is functioning in a very healthy state, that is the difference. I mean, we have with hospitals and homeless ministries and all the different things throughout history that the church has been on the front lines of creating that space so that people are supported. But I think, and you may speak to this differently or with even more clarity, that we live in a time where there is the opportunity for more isolation than ever. And so it creates more opportunity for people to find themselves in a situation where they're down and out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you said it well. And I don't know that I could even put better words around it, but I think a pandemic that nobody's talking about is the pandemic of isolation. And we're seeing it. And the conversation you had, we hear that story over and over. And that brother is really good and okay for a while. But if that situation continues to deteriorate, all of a sudden
Yeah.
that relationship could deteriorate. And so it's so tough. And so if you have the built-in safety net of community, like a church community, operating as it should operate, then it would be so much harder for people to fall into this level of isolation. But I think, we talk about it all the time. It's so easy to show up on Sunday and fake it for an hour, and I think we would all be shocked at how many people are doing just that.
Yeah.
They're able to slip in and slip out, and they're doing the deal, and it's great. But they're one decision, they're one incident away, and they're truly, really living in isolation. And so, you're right. I mean, and that's why I think some of our best partners are church partners, and honestly, we tell people all the time, like, it's because people want to know, like, well, what does it mean to show up, or how do I do that? And it's like, well, we kind of break our volunteer opportunities into, we have do for opportunities, which are the ones I think we typically all specialize in. Like, let me just come paint a room, or let me come serve a meal, or let me, it's transactional. But really, some of the most powerful opportunities we have are what we just call be with opportunities. And our small group just did this last week. We took a Friday night, we went up to to the women and kids shelter, and we brought about 30 gingerbread houses with us, and we sat in the cafeteria and we let moms and kids build gingerbread houses. And while we just sat with them and got to know them, talked with them, we just lived in community together for 2 hours. And I watched as a business owner sat at one table and had a conversation with this lady and got to know her, and listened as he was like, hey, have you thought about this? And hey, could I help you in this area? And hey, could our organization come alongside you? And I think that's the church. Again, it's the most authentic version of the church I've ever seen. It's because it's real.
Love that picture. I think you're involved in a church that is part of a very big organization with North Point. I attend a very large church. There's been a lot of conversation around big church, small church, people get lost. Taking that out of it, how do we as believers more faithfully engage in that community aspect? Because I think it is so easy for us to do the go serve and paint a wall, show up one day and serve at the kitchen. But how do we reorient our lives, especially in a culture and a time where it feels like, we were even talking earlier, kids sporting events and this and that, because I think, that there are important aspects, but even in your own life or people around you, what kind of advice have you given? What kind of recommendations about reorienting your life to create that space so that we can truly engage with people and be community? Because what I find is there's this, I've got this group of friends, and if I'm not careful, that is the only thing I'm seeing are those relationships I've already engaged with.
Yeah. It's certainly, I don't know that you can program it. It's not easy. It takes a lot of intentionality. I think it takes personal intentionality. But I mean, I think it's something that all churches can do a better job of. And I mean, I say that talking to myself as somebody who led in churches for 12 years. I'm certainly not standing here casting any stones at any pastors. I know how busy pastors are. I think if we could help people, and maybe it starts with a transaction, and so it's just a Saturday morning or a Friday afternoon, or you go do a thing. But if we could get people to understand the impact of moving from transaction to transformation, and the power that is just showing up, then I think this would take care of itself. Unfortunately, you can't. I think maybe you program it at first of like, hey, we're going to go do this thing, and are you intentionally looking for ways to get yourself uncomfortable? And I think as humans, we naturally push against that. But there was nothing comfortable about Atlanta Mission for me when I started. I mean, it felt so foreign, right? And now I love it. Love being on campus. Love it. You realize like, oh, like it's just people. Like they're no different than I am. And so intentionally getting ourselves uncomfortable and putting ourselves in that spot where we have to be vulnerable, so that genuine, authentic community and relationships can happen. and you never know. And just living a life open-handed, I mean, you never know. I mean, um, we were at a donor dinner, and we brought a client to speak to our donors, and you can't manufacture this. Like, nobody intended for this to happen, but we brought a client. She's got this amazing story. A really good friend of mine was sitting at the table, and he just happened to be sitting right across the table from her. Um, he works at one of the largest construction companies in Atlanta. Um, she's telling her story, and somebody raises their hand and said, "Hey, if you could do anything in life, what is it you'd want to do?" And she says, "I've always wanted to become a certified welder." I never would have guessed that that's what she always wanted. She sits back down, and he's about to have a heart attack because he's like, and so like finally he like busts. He's like, "If I could get you certified, would you want to do it?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "All right, done." And they worked it out. He got her set up, and now she's working. And you're like that, but that's God, right? That's God at
Yes.
work. And
Yes.
if he, and I know it was a donor dinner, so he probably wasn't that uncomfortable, but like he did have to put himself in a spot where he was willing to be used, even though he had no idea that's why he was going that night. And so I think if we would live like that, we'd see a lot of change pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Homeless population in Atlanta. We know Atlanta's a huge metropolitan area. What are
Mm-hmm.
you seeing in the current state of those who are struggling with
Mm-hmm.
home security, and where do you see that going in the year ahead? And what are you guys doing? You mentioned even analyzing, going, "Hey, we're trying to figure out what do we adjust." Talk to us a little bit about kind of where things are, where things are going, and what you guys are doing to adjust to the changing population and changing issues that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, we tell everybody that the face of homelessness is always evolving. And Atlanta Mission has historically focused on what has typically become known as those who are chronically homeless. And
Yeah.
so the easiest way for somebody who doesn't have the time to really dive into what that means is that's typically the person that you see that comes to your mind if you think of somebody who's living in housing insecurity and struggling with that. They've been in a state of homelessness for a prolonged period of time, multiple recurrences of homelessness. Um, that's only about 20% of the people who are experiencing homelessness, though. And I think that's probably a big learning for most
Yeah.
people. 80% of those who are experiencing homelessness is far more situational or circumstantial. And what we're seeing now is the rise of this, what people are starting to call the working poor. I think so many would be shocked at how many of their coworkers are couch surfing or living in their car and then getting up and showing up for a 9 to 5. And again, kind of like the story you told, you can do that for a little while. But if one thing happens, if something happens to that car, or something
Yeah.
happens to that relationship where you're sleeping on the couch, all of a sudden now showing up to work becomes even harder than it is. And so the other thing we're seeing is, and this has happened quickly. I mean, within the last 4 years, quickly, a significant increase of intact families experiencing homelessness. When I started, you would never have an intact family, mom, dad, and
Yeah.
kids show up. And now we're seeing that. And to be honest with you, all the service providers in our city are rather flat-footed on that. I mean, there's a couple of beds, but that's a really
Challenging.
challenging.
Yeah.
What do you do with that, and how do you handle that? And so for us, we are truly seeing. I mean, homelessness is on the rise. It continues to be on the rise. Inflation and the economy doesn't help. Just it's expensive. I mean, it really is. It is expensive out there, and it's hard to keep up with that. And so we're looking at what we can do to not only invest in our current services and continue to make those better, but also how do we broaden our reach?
Yeah.
We've got to get better at serving multiple different types of demographics. And so we've kind of gone back to the drawing board and are taking everything and saying, hey, we really need to build it, increase our capacity probably by 40 to 50%, so that we can create new pathways, because we're having a lot of people show up at our door and they don't actually need a 12-month transformational model because they're not chronically homeless,
Yeah.
but they need something. And so how can we create a service offering for them that's tailored to their needs. Maybe it's a job upskilling, or get them out of a job and into a career pathway. What does that look like? Maybe it's a 60, 90-day program, not not a 6 to 9 month that ultimately could take upwards of 12-month program. So I think those are the questions we're wrestling with, and that's what we're seeing. Certainly, addiction, mental health continue to play a huge part. I mean, anywhere to 30% of those that we serve are dealing with some form of mental health. And then you also have, about 30% are dealing with some form of addiction. And so, and those are two services that everywhere states struggle to provide. I mean, we have great mental health services if you have a lot of money and you can invest. But like for those living on the poverty line, that's really tough.
Yeah. No, it's one of the things I tell part of the guys that are in our community of, wherever they are along the journey, that part of the process is most of us have the means at times to go pay for a counselor, and we probably should be investing in that. But the reality of it is most of that is a short term, a commitment for a season. And the reality is you have to stay in community for proper, healthy mental space. And what we even talked about financially getting, we need community around us. We need relationships. And oftentimes, especially for us as men, we can jump in there, do the task, work on the job, focus on all these other things, and forget the importance of cultivating those relationships, and find ourselves, especially guys that go into their 40s and 50s, that have invested so much in their family and their career. And if their family crumbles or their career crumbles, then they find themselves in a space where they don't have any relationships anymore. And the importance of ongoing cultivating that space where we're staying connected, where we're taking opportunities to share what's going on in our life beyond just how your sports team and what the weather is. And for guys, we have to be super intentional of that. Turning back to the population there in Atlanta, what are the current numbers with where there's, kind of what people are saying about the number currently of those who are in a homeless insecurity situation in the metropolitan area?
Yeah, the numbers are one of those. It's always hard to pin down. We do every city does a point in time count, and it's kind of the best way we know how to get a snapshot of what's happening. It happens over 1 or 2 nights in January. Volunteers go out and they do a survey, and they're able to count those who are willing to be counted. I think the reason I struggle with the point in time count is because we serve more people than the point in time count says are homeless. And so I think, and I'm not going to get these numbers exactly right, but if the point in time count says, 2,500 or 3,000 people, I think it's at least 2x of that in our city. And we're seeing it grow. Like I said, you're seeing rises and increase of family homelessness and things like that. And so I think we're seeing some stabilization. A lot of the permanent supportive housing efforts that we've been doing in our city, I think, have been really effective for, again, there is a certain group of people that's a great pathway for. I mean, high mental health, high physical health, elderly, permanent supportive housing is a great outlet. And so as we're getting more and more of that in our city, I think that's helped. So we're seeing some stabilization of some of those like chronic homeless categories. But what you're seeing is that increase of situational that's offsetting. So it feels like you're winning in one area and not getting ahead in the other. So it's kind of keeping us pretty static.
I've got a question. I don't know with you focused there in the Atlanta area, but you may just because of the circle you're in have some. But one of the things I feel like I've noticed, and it may be the wrong assumption, but it feels like the more I have traveled, the more I've seen people in smaller communities that are having issues. When in the past you would go through smaller towns and not see anybody that seems to be in a situation of homelessness. Do you know anything about kind of that change in demographic?
Yeah, I think it's probably harder to pinpoint like why, but I think what you're seeing is definitely a reality. I mean, I see it. I can drive north of the city, and you see individuals sleeping outside of banks or on benches that you thought, man, I never used to see this here. And so I think that speaks to again the challenges people are finding, and money's just not going as far. Things cost a lot more money. The margins are a lot thinner. And so even in our community, I think it's kind of underlying our whole conversation is, what are we doing as followers of Jesus to check on those around us, and to really not only have the conversations around, hey, maybe God's given us what he's given us so that we can be a blessing to others, and we need to educate ourselves better about what's happening. But also, like, hey, has anybody checked in on so-and-so? Hey, I heard so-and-so lost their job this week. I heard, I mean, this happened to, just in our family. I mean, I was talking to my daughter, and one of her friends, like, yeah, she just made the comment. She's like, yeah, her dad's been out of work for a while. I was like, gosh, I had no idea. Like, and I mean, like, man, we should, like, are they okay? Like, because that can spiral pretty quickly, right? And I think that's part of why you're seeing it. I think also, you, people, and this is just human nature, we all are, we all get filled with hope, and are like, hey, I'm going to go try something. And I'm not saying that because it's a bad thing, but especially in the Atlanta area, there's a lot of appeal about our city and our suburbs. And I can't tell you how many people I've met who aren't from here, and they ended up here from another state, another city far away, because they were told how great things can be here, or how easy it is to find a job here. And so they move here, live with their cousin, live with brother, sister, whatever, and 6 months later find themselves no money, burned relationship, and no way to get back home. And so if they were in that suburb, then that's where that's where they are. So.
Yeah. Tensley, this has been a phenomenal conversation. We could talk a lot longer, but as we wrap up our time, I would love to hear a little bit of maybe something God's taught you in this new leadership role that you've kind of recognized in your own leadership style, or some principle you've adapted. I know it's very different than leading in the local church, but yet there's probably a lot of things that you bring to the table. And then last, but definitely not least, just what's God stirring in your heart, whether it's something you read this morning in scripture, or, what's kind of on Tinsley's heart right now.
Yeah. I think the first is, a little bit about me and my stories. This may not surprise you, but this isn't super attractive, so I'm sorry. But I think from a leadership perspective, how powerful clarity and simplicity is. And it's, for us, we really fight that tug. There's so much we can do, but it's like, hey, this is what we do. And we have to be like, this is what we're good at. This is what our donors invest in. This is what our staff is trained for. We got to keep the main thing, the main thing. And so, we're pretty ruthless around here, around, constantly asking our staff, what do we do? How do we do it? Why do we do it? What do we do? How do we do it? Why do we do it? And like, if you don't know the answers to those questions, then we're running the risk of missional, misalignment. And so I think, just to the leader out there, keep the main thing, clarity, 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 clarity. Take people always back to the mission, vision, and purpose. And that's the answer to each of those three questions for us, is that it's rooted in our mission, vision, and purpose. Mission, vision, and purpose.
And it may not be attractive, but it's super important.
That's exactly right. To the other, I've just been, I've really been wrestling with this question, and it's kind of rooted in a couple of different places in the Gospel of John. Typically this time of year, I'm a big Luke 2 fan, and I just love that passage, and but I've really been wrestling with this, truly this, like, what does love require of me? And looking through John's account of the life of Jesus, but like specifically, if you go from John 1 to John 3:16, it's like in John 1, he makes it very, 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 very clear that like the whole reason God sent Jesus is rooted in the love that he has for us. And it was just like almost love commanded, compelled, all the things. And then you get to John 3:16, and he sums it up: for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And then you fast forward to the very end, and you're at the, at the Last Supper, and it's like, hey, a new command I give to you: love as I have loved, and serve as I have served. And that's just been something I've been trying to really, like, okay, if that's true, if that's what love required of our Father, sacrifice, presence. I mean, think about that. Just like, I'm going to come be with you. I am going to come live and dwell. I mean, wow, the incarnation.
Yes.
I hope we never get over that. The miracle and the mystery of presence, like, and it was compelled by love. Like, okay, then what does that mean for me? What does my love look like for my family? What does it look like for those that I get to work alongside of? What does it look like for those who I get to serve? What would love require of me if that's what it required of God? So,
Tinsley, such a powerful way to wrap up our conversation. I even yesterday was thinking about Advent and thinking about, that him coming to be with us and the waiting that was there, and we're celebrating the birth. And yet for me, it was also that reminder, especially in recent weeks, of longing for his return and setting all things right, and how we get to be a part of that kingdom, bringing the kingdom of God into the world around us, and yet the longing for him to make all things right, and to set all things as they should be. And as believers, what do we do to keep our eyes fixed on that? And I'm just super thankful for what you're doing. I'm thankful for your time with us today. Your work reminds us there's no story beyond redemption. And it also reminds us of the power of community. And if you're listening today and you would say you are in that place of isolation, or you don't know who you would call, if you're a guy, plug into our community, get connected. It's going to take some work. As we say, forging brotherhood is truly forging. It takes, in all relationships, leaning in and sometimes making yourself vulnerable. But the other option is just, it's not a viable option to be isolated and alone. So if you are looking for community, reach out to us. Let us get you connected. Thank you so much for taking your time to listen. Tinsley, thank you so much for this today. God bless and Godspeed.
Thanks, Nate. Appreciate it.